Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. It's Ren here. Today I'm going to talk about a phenomenon that I've noticed in the INFJ sphere of experience, and I'm curious to know if you have experienced it too or seen it around you, or if it's just me and I'm over interpreting things, as you know, is certainly a possible thing. And I call it the INFJ Lethargy. Right, so if you're interested, stick around. Okay. Now be aware that I have written a book on the INFJ. Look at this amazing little product, the Ecstatic Soul. Get a copy if you haven't yet. It's a reference book. The links are below, and there's my book on, well, it's a book of fiction, Kafka, Dostoevsky, Camus, if you like modernism, if you like tortured characters and dreamy scenes, landscapes and cityscapes. The rumor has it the main character of the Infinite Castle is an INFJ, so an exploration of INFJ in fiction. Get a copy. There is also my Patreon page, which you can follow down there, anywhere from €3 a month. It really, really supports me, so I appreciate anyone's support. What is the INFJ lethargy? Well, literally, it is the sense that I get the INFJs that I've had the chance to meet in real life, because this is not necessarily something that you can quite gauge, in an online exchange, at least nowhere near the same extent. People that I met, particularly in the workplace. The workplace is really the crucible of those challenges leading to that kind of phenomenology, that kind of behavior that I notice. Obviously, someone who's lethargic, someone who seems to be lacking energy, someone who comes across as phlegmatic, but not for reasons that have to do with necessarily their intrinsic makeup, but sometimes you're lethargic not because it's in your nature or by it's your essence to be lethargic. It's more so that there is a lack somewhere, right? So often nowadays, this is something that I think you're going to really resonate with, particularly if you've experienced the world of work, office work in particular, but also other areas of work. There's more and more of a focus on staff well-being, mental health, and all these things, which on paper are good things. If you wanted to be cynical, you'd argue that management just wants to have workers that don't go on sick leave and that are very efficient, so that they can, be the best return on investments that they can, and that the policy of well-being and mental health is just part of that investment package, smartly dressed up as something that seems to care altruistically about your health. But why am I connecting this to the INFJ lethargy? Essentially, the idea is usually that if you're lethargic, maybe you're lacking some vitamins, or you are not taking zinc or magnesium or vitamin D, like I said, vitamins, maybe, or you're not doing enough sport or something like that. So we're looking at extraneous reasons why you're lethargic. And you seem to just have this lack of energy, you seem to be slow, you seem to not be quick to respond, you're not particularly proactive, that kind of thing, right? And so the immediate tendency in our contemporary world is to try to look for these extraneous reasons, reasons that are like these extraneous fixes in some sense, right? It's like the fixes are supposed to be through taking different medicine or going outside more often and doing sports. Right? So they're external to yourself, okay? And it's the same as tempting to assume when you're an INFJ and you are in fact lethargic, because that's the kind of information that you're fed, right? Around you in the media, by your colleagues, by your management, and so forth. And my hypothesis is that INFJ lethargy is something that I see so often, and seems to be so often a trait of INFJs. Could be the traits of some other types that I've explored less or focused on less due to any different kinds of reasons. But there are certainly people of certain types that don't seem to be struck by that. And so it seems to me that there is a type relationship there, including an INFJ relationship. And that leads me to assume that it's not just about extraneous reasons. Why would it be the case that it's specifically INFJs who don't take the right taking the right nutrition or compliments, or don't do the physical activity. Sure, they're introverts, but that is nowhere near good enough to explain that phenomenon. So there is a tendency in our society to, like I said, to interpret everything mechanistically. If you have this condition, it's because there is an unbalance somewhere and you can fix it, right? Change the gauges there, like add a bit of this, remove a bit of that, add that activity, and you'll be fine, right? It's often the way it's conceived. It's always the way it's presented. And that doesn't leave any room for interpretation that is not mechanistic, it's not utilitarian, it's not means ends. And in the sequel to the Ecstatic Soul, which is coming out soon, I discuss a lot of the issues with the mechanism of means ends thinking that dominates our technological societies. It's simply to think about it as sickness of the soul. A sickness of the soul is going to sound amusingly antiquated or magical to some ears that have been well molded by the mechanistic paradigm. And yet I think that regardless of what our stance is towards, the metaphorical aspect of it, or whether we believe in anything like the soul of religion or something like that, even if you leave that aside, there is a sense in which when you say sickness of the soul, it seems to say something, right? Don't bring religion into it, don't bring whatever into it. Just look at the phrase sickness of the soul. It seems to say something. And it seems to say something that is not to do with that correcting of the balance that you can do through chemicals or through physical activity. Sickness of the soul sounds like something deeper, it sounds like something more profound. In fact, it sounds like it invokes the notion of meaning. You have sickness of the soul when you are struggling with meaning, that you're not finding the meaning that you're looking for. Whether because you've been taught to be skeptical of, seeing the world in an intrinsically meaningful sense, a meaningful way, or through a meaningful lens. Everything is mechanistic, it's a relationship of cause and effect and so on. Or because you want to find the meaning, but you just don't find it in the various social areas where you operate. And I think that when there is this disconnect between the meaning that you're looking for and its absence, effective absence, because everything is dominated by this utilitarian means end thinking, in some way I think that's actually the perfect formula for a sickness of the soul that some people might call depression, but sometimes it's not really depression, in the sense that it could actually be fixed relatively easily if only the right conditions were united. Excuse me. And there's also this idea that, often as soon as we start talking about depression, we start medicalizing it. And again, medicalizing is means end thinking, is mechanistic thinking. And I really want to keep this notion of sickness of the soul as something that is not means ends. It's something that has to do with meaning, something that has to do with the struggle to find it. And I think that a lot of the time when we see INFJs that seem to have this lethargy is because they're fed a discourse. It's not that they're not intelligent enough that they can, to be able to understand it. They can understand it just fine, but it just sounds so meaningless to them. It sounds so meaningless to us. And we often just are tempted to shrug our shoulders and think, what is the wider vision behind this? Why do I have to work on this Excel table? Why do I have to be this particular section, this particular point in the progression of logistical, value chain? Why do I have to make this PowerPoint presentation with all this technical language that is going to be seen by a bunch of spectacled people that seem completely alienated from me? Why this disgustingly bland and cold office that I have to be in, and I have to interact with people that don't seem to have any souls themselves? And all these whys just, I think, contribute to this. It manifests in INFJs as a form of lethargy, and I think it's because INFJs just have to take in all this data that they're not really suited to integrate because of the makeup that they have, cognitively speaking, which is a makeup oriented to meaning making and to an innate attraction to the significance of things and the wider holistic significance of things, in order to make the world intelligible the way that they are meant to make it intelligible, to assert purpose and meaning in their lives. When that is kind of taken away from their world of opportunity, and the workplace with the dominance of management ideology is really the quintessence of where that takes place, it just seems to manifest as this kind of, like you feel a little slower, you feel like a little like, am I in a bad dream? And it seems to manifest as lethargy, and that's why I call it INFJ lethargy. And I suspect, and therefore hypothesize, that this is all interlinked, that this lethargy that we see is just an external manifestation of a disconnect between what an INFJ is ideally made to interact with in terms of their best inclinations and talents and meaning-seeking tendencies, and what's on offer, which is just not correlated with it at all. It requires significant effort to bridge, and with pain to bridge that gap. Of course, that's fatiguing, and I think the lethargy that's felt and the lethargy that's seen by others is due to that. And in case you wondered, that is certainly something that I experience myself. So please let me know in the comments if you relate, if you don't, if you think that there is a solution. I'm just wondering, because this video is not about offering solutions, but maybe offering solutions is something that we can do in further videos. And of course, I sketched some possibilities in my future book too. In the meantime, I'll see you next weekend, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.